Horizon Chess Home Series reaction. This is the real Rambo, Roy Benevidez. Benevidez. I don't know how to pronounce that. The Green Beret that took on an army with just a knife. Okay, so Rambo is based on this guy? This is ridiculous. I love electrician because, I don't know, like, I think I'm on internet good enough while, I guess. I don't know how to say that. But I still don't come across any channel that talks about topics like this. Electrician is really unique in this manner, right? First it was like the Fury thing, right? Was it Fury? Yeah, it was Fury, right? It was like, okay, real life, where it's based on type of way. And now the real Rambo. I'm surprised nobody else talks about this, but I'm glad Electrician is making video about this. So this is an actual thing. Some guy actually did all this shit. Just like took on a whole army with just a knife. Obviously, there's going to be more nuance behind that because it's real life. But it's still going to be interesting. One thing I realized that Electrician tells stories that are like so ridiculous. You think, okay, this is so Hollywood. And Hollywood does make videos about that. But it is real. Right? It's like you learn about things and realize that Hollywood is not real. All this action shit is not real. But then you realize there are still moments in life that somehow is action movie like how that makes this so crazy, right? All the way to world wars and God knows, this makes it so crazy. Or even the American Revolution time and things like that. There's always some instances. I guess that kind of thing that fuels video games like Assassin's Creed, right? Where they can portray some badass character. But they can base it on something. I don't know if Assassin's Creed actually based on something, but they have enough like information that they can actually create a setting and base a character based on real life person or something, because obviously there are so many badass people, right? So yeah, this is just an hour ago. I thought it was a day ago. Okay, so Electrician just posted this video. All right, so it's going to be interesting. I don't know if I can do this in one video or two part because it's 45 minutes. If I do in one take, it will be like 1.5 hours, and most of the people like tune out after like 40-45 minutes. So we'll see. Let's watch one. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. That way I know which type of videos to react to more. You can really help out this channel by helping the algorithm and things. And yeah, if you want to see another Electrician reaction I did, check out the link in the description or in the end card. There's a playlist I for it. And yeah, let's watch it.
John Rambo, the action hero that was an unstoppable, unkillable Green Beret from the Vietnam War that went into battle with nothing more than a big knife. This video is not about him. It's also not about the man that inspired that character. That was Audie Murphy. This video is about the real Rambo, the actual man that was inspired to join the military because of Audie Murphy, that would go on to become a Green Beret and go into combat against 1,000 men with nothing more than a big knife. Today we're talking about call sign Tango Mike, aka that mean Mexican Master Sergeant Roy Benevidez. This video is brought to you by Delete Me!
I thought you'd never.
Yeah, well, go to original video page link from there, support this channel, or go to joindeleteme.com/electrician. And yeah, let's do it.
Video.
Okay, one man going against 1,000 guy. This like that Dan Daly video, right? In which like even his platoon or whatever just thought like, okay, I'm hearing gunfire in the distance, he's probably dead, even though he just probably killed a lot of people. I think he was in China, right, at a fort or something similar to that.
Born on August 5th, 1935, Roy's first memory in life was attending his own father's funeral after he had passed away from tuberculosis when Roy was 3 years old. 1 year later, Roy's mother would remarry, and 9 months after that, she would give birth to Roy's new half-sister, and from that moment on, Roy was essentially on his own. His parents gave all of their attention to their new daughter, and Roy and his younger brother Rogelio were kind of neglected. 2 years later, Roy's mother would develop a cough that would get progressively worse and worse, similar to how Roy's father had. Roy's mother now had tuberculosis too, and while she was on her deathbed, her husband, Roy's stepfather, would inform her that he would absolutely not be raising another man's kids. And 6-year-old Roy overhears this. He's terrified. He has no idea what's going to happen to him and his younger brother Rogelio. He's already lost his dad, he's about to lose his mom, and his stepdad doesn't want him, and that's the only family he's ever known in his entire life. On the day of his mother's funeral, his stepfather tells him and Rogelio to pack their things. They're going to go live somewhere else. They load up in the car, go off to where the funeral's held, and at the funeral, a man comes up and introduces himself as Nicholas Benevidez. He is their father's brother, Roy and Rogelio's uncle, and they're going to come live with him. After the funeral, they load up in Uncle Nicholas's car and they head off to El Campo, Texas, Roy and Rogelio's new home. Upon their arrival, they get to meet what is going to be their new immediate family. They have their Uncle Nicholas, their Aunt Alexandria, their grandfather Salvador, and their 8 cousins. Roy is then informed that it is now going to be 7 boys sharing 4 beds, and that everyone in this family has to work to make this entire thing work because they don't have a lot of money. All the kids in the family are expected to go to school, get good grades, and then after school, they all have a job that they are expected to go out and do to help contribute to the family. And at the age of 7, Roy's first job was to go shine shoes to earn a little bit of extra money. Then in the summers or any other time the opportunity...
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, when you really think about it, a kid like small as 7-year-old has to think about responsibility, actually concept of work. I mean, obviously you have to do what you have to do, but that's insane, right? Growing up, I mean, obviously that will teach you discipline and things like that, but it also takes away some part of childhood. And stepfather thing, right? Like, you agree to marry someone who has kids. Now that person is gonna die, and just like, fuck, screw these kids, I'm just gonna like, I mean, in a way, sure, like, it's not his responsibility, but come on, it's also like asshole is, right? I don't know. I mean, should have shown somewhat support at least. Like, fine, you're gonna, give that to your uncle or something, fine. But at least, I don't know, show support. It's just, I don't know.
Presented itself, they would all go out as a family and work in the fields picking crops. And this goes on for Roy's entire childhood, and his new family is incredible. His aunt, his uncle, his grandfather Salvador, they're the best people on the planet, but they're also being spread across their work and the 9 other kids in the house, so no kid gets a whole lot of attention. So between that, losing both of his parents, and being abandoned by his stepfather, he's kind of an angry kid, understandably so. So at a young age, he developed a pretty bad attitude, and he was not afraid to fight about it. One of his favorite things to do when he was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old was to go to the movie theater and watch the newsreels of all the different things that were happening in World War II. And he was inspired by the paratroopers. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in the United States Army. But the problem with this pastime of going to the movie theater to watch all the newsreels was that you had to pay to get inside, and Roy didn't have any money. All his shoe shining money went back to the family. So Roy and a bunch of other kids would wait outside the movie theater for one of the previous showings to leave, and hopefully rich people would throw their pocket change out and let all the poor kids scramble and fight over it. It didn't take young Roy long to figure out that if he just beat up all the other kids, he would get all the money, and then he wouldn't have to run and dive for pocket change.
The enemy cannot push a button if you disable his hand.
And that's just the beginning of the fighting. It gets so much worse because as World War II progresses and all the young men go off to fight this war, there's a huge lack of manpower all across the United States. And to help alleviate that, one of the things the United States government does is basically opens up the southern border so that people can freely come into the United States and begin working. Because of that, there ends up being this huge misconception, especially in any state bordering Mexico, that any person of Hispanic descent wasn't even American, they were just some Mexican that was showing up to work in the fields.
Y el acento, ¿dónde are you from?
Scranton. Y before that, La Philadelphia.
This leads to young Roy getting picked on at school. All the kids are calling him a
Yeah,
dumb.
Office is like a fun show. I never really like, when I first watched it, the pace wasn't as like the one I wanted when I was a kid. Now I just don't have time to watch. But sometimes when I like watch the clip or something, yeah, it's really like, like jokes and deliveries are really good.
Mexican, they're telling him he's not American, they're calling him a pepper belly, and he's like 8, 9 years old. He has no idea what's going on, so he goes to his grandfather Salvador, and grandpa explains to him, Roy, the Benevidez family fought against Mexico to gain their independence, just like any white person's ancestors fought against Great Britain to get their independence. Your mother was Yaqui Native American. You are just as much, if not more American than anybody else. The Benevidez family name is Mexican, but we are Americans. You have multiple cousins fighting for America in the war right now. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not American, which is a great sentiment. I love it. However, what young, angry Roy honed in on was they fought for it. From this point forward, anybody that wants to make fun of Roy has a fight on their hands, and they almost never won because Roy, at the age of 9, 10 years old, has been working in fields and shining shoes after school every day for years. He is way above the average level of toughness for a young man. And Roy wasn't even that big of a kid. If anything, he was smaller than average, but none of the bullies were bigger than him either once they were looking up at him from the flat of their back, which is always where they happen to find themselves eventually. Now, it's also important to mention that Roy, while he does have a temper and he's not afraid to fight about it, he does have standards. He was being raised right by his aunt and his uncle and his grandfather.
Principles.
Roy would not hit a girl if a girl made fun of him.
He's a good kid.
But what he would do is when they went out to recess, he would kick dirt at her until her brother or her boyfriend came to stop him, and then he'd beat the shit out of that guy.
Hello, how are you?
Principle.
And this goes on for Roy's entire childhood. He's
See, the problem with that is he has principles that he won't hit a girl. But he also has a principle that he can't let it go, right? So somebody has to answer for it. There you go.
always getting in fights. He struggles in the classroom academically, but outside of school, he does work super hard to help provide for his family. He still loves going to the movie theater, watching all the newsreels about World War II. He still wants to grow up to be a paratrooper, and he also loves hanging out with his uncle and his grandfather, Salvador. And his grandpa had all these amazing stories that he would share with him, and all these stories had some underlying meaning or some lesson that Roy needed to be taught. And his favorite story was when his grandpa was younger and he was a cowboy, and he was on this trail, and another cowboy had fallen off his horse down onto a cliff face and he was stuck. And Grandpa Salvador stopped, took his belt off, and lowered it down to help pull this cowboy up and saved his life. And the moral of that story was, when somebody needs help, you help them. And all this keeps going on until he's about 14 years old and he drops out of school. He's not going to go to high school. He's just going to go get a full-time job and help support his family. So that's what he does. He goes out and he starts working at this local tire shop. Uncle Nicholas, realizing that Roy is going to be a man soon and that getting in fights like he does is going to have real-world repercussions, figures that he needs to help Roy get over that somehow. So he encourages Roy to start amateur boxing, and Roy is incredible at it. He makes it all the way to the state tournament his first year of doing it. While there, he ends up losing his very first match, and in the locker room after his fight, the young man that had just beat him comes up and wants to shake his hand now that they have their gloves off, and Roy's anger and temper gets the better of him, and he ends up fighting this kid in the locker room, wrestling him into a...
Yeah, I somehow saw that coming, right? I like to psychoanalyze people, and every picture that Federation painted so far, I knew this was coming. He was like gonna be a real sportsman and just like shake his hand. Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
A stall and shoving his head into a toilet. After Roy does that, all the other coaches, all the other fighters, Roy's coach, all look at him like, what the fuck, dude? And they're all disappointed. And it was the first time in Roy's life that he felt ashamed and disappointed in himself. And this is where Roy really starts to get a lid and a grasp on how to control his anger. After that, Roy gives up amateur boxing and just continues working.
Yeah, basically how to go from a street kid to like professional. Like, what is the difference, right? I mean, his whole life, like, you know, fight and things like that happen. It's like never really shame element is there. But when it's like a professional environment, right? Somebody's trying to be a real, you know, like real sport and try to shake hands and like shit like this. I mean, of course, everybody's going to be disappointed. So, you know, he probably never experienced that before.
Full-time at the tire shop, and that's when his boss, Mr. Haddock, the tire shop owner, also kind of becomes his father figure too, because he works with him and he's around him so much. He just becomes that older male role model that Roy is always kind of
been Jackie Chan?
And he continues to help Roy mature and get a better grip on his anger and more control of himself. And this goes on for a couple of years, and then one day when Roy is 17 years old, a recruiter from the Texas National Guard comes in and wants to hang up a flyer at the tire shop for anybody who's interested in joining the Texas National Guard. And on that flyer was none other than Roy's role model, Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier of World War II. You see, this is right in the middle of the Korean War, so Audie Murphy, the World War II war hero, had joined the
Okay, why hasn't Federation made a video about Audie Murphy? If he's the inspiration behind Rambo and things. I'm guessing he's gonna make the video, right?
Texas National Guard to help with recruiting, and he was also going to train the next generation of soldiers. And at this point, Audie Murphy's the shit. He's got an award-winning book, he's an actor, and when he's acting, he's playing the role of himself in movies, and he's being told by directors, hey, I know you were there and you're literally just portraying the shit you did, but you need to tamp it down a little bit because it's so unrealistic, nobody's gonna believe this story. This is a Texan that was rejected by the Marine Corps for being too small and then went on
Imagine that. Hey, I'm not feeling it, right? This is not how the character works, right? This is not realistic. This is not how you do it. And Hottie just looks at the director like, the fuck you on about, right? I was there, right?
on to be the most decorated soldier of World War II, earning the Medal of Honor for going toe-to-toe with an entire German SS battalion by himself from the back of a flaming M10 tank destroyer with a 50 caliber machine gun. So Roy Benevidez figures if the Texas National Guard is good enough for Audie Murphy, then that's exactly where he wants to be. So he joins the Texas National Guard, he ships off, goes to basic training, ends up coming back, he's doing his weekends, he's doing his training in the summer. That goes on for a couple of years while he's still working at the tire shop with Mr. Haddock. Then one day he decides that he likes doing Army stuff a lot more than he likes changing tires, so he wants to go full-time Army. He goes over to the active duty recruiter's office. It's a shared office. They've got the Navy, the Marines, the Army, and the Air Force all right there in one building. Roy walks right past the Navy, walks right past the Marines, walks right past the Air Force, goes straight to the active duty Army recruiter, says, here's my guard papers. I'm a corporal. I want to be a paratrooper. I don't just want a normal contract. I want a contract that guarantees me airborne school. At this point, the Army recruiter looks at Roy, who's like 130 pounds soaking wet, and he's like, man, you're not big enough to be a paratrooper. At which point, I'm paraphrasing here, but Roy says something along the lines of, well, I could cut you down to my size and we'll see if you're good enough to be a paratrooper. Maybe that'll help you make your decision. At which point, the Marine recruiter overhears that and he comes walking over and is like, son, you should be a Marine. You've got the right attitude. I don't...
Obviously, Marine comes there, right? He did that crazy shit and suddenly alarm bell goes off. The Marine guy just like stands up with a smug face. Come on, son, you're a Marine. I mean, listen to yourself. You sound crazy. You're a Marine. Come on.
I don't care how big you are, you should come be a devil dog with me. At which point Roy's like, no, I don't want to be a Marine. I want to be in the Army just like Audie Murphy was, which brings everything full circle because Audie Murphy was rejected from the Marines for being too small. And now Roy Benevidez is rejecting the Marines because he wants to be like Audie Murphy. Then the other Army recruiter, who's a captain, an officer, somebody that outranks the sergeant that thinks Roy's too small, comes in and he's like, no, we'll take him. Come with me. So they go, they start doing the paperwork and Roy's like, okay, I'm a corporal in the National Guard. I've already been through basic training. I've already done through job training. You should just be able to send me straight to airborne school and then give me a duty station. And the recruiter's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Roy signs on the dotted line. He packs his shit. He gets on the bus and he's off to the Army. And Roy then immediately finds out the hard way that recruiter was either not listening to him at all or he was lying to him because they sent Roy straight to basic training again. And to add insult to injury, he is also not awarded an airborne slot after that, so he's not going to be a paratrooper like he always wanted to. After he gets done with training, he immediately gets sent.
I mean, that's basic shit, right? Happens even in today. Oh, you're gonna get the shit. Oh, you're gonna get all the like glory and everything. Just sign it here. Once signing happens, there you go. Like, what's gonna happen? Now what's gonna happen? There you go. Once you're enlisted, after that, yeah, who cares?
Where he is going to be there right after the Korean War ended, and he's going to be manning the DMZ, the demilitarized zone between what is now North and South Korea. He's in Korea for a year, then he comes back home for a little bit stateside, then they ship him out to Germany, and while he's there, he learns how to speak German, and in Roy's own words, he becomes the first Hispanic American that could speak German with a southern accent.
Just learns it.
Correcto.
He gets done in Germany, he comes back home, he goes to military police school, becomes an MP, and he gets assigned to basically being a glorified chauffeur for high-ranking military officers, generals, colonels, etc. And then randomly, one day, a couple months out from his contract being up with the Army, he's trying to decide whether or not he wants to re-enlist, and this General Westmoreland, asks him, you ever thought about being a paratrooper? And Roy's like, yeah, actually, that's the only reason I'm here. I wanted to do that.
Imagine that after all that shit, right? Being a chauffeur to all these big military guys and just like being angry while driving, like, what the fuck? This is not what I want. And after all that, when the contract's about to, hey, have you thought about paratrooper? He probably paused there for a few seconds, just screaming in his head, and then like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I thought about that.
Kind of got screwed out of it. I'm thinking about re-enlisting, and if I re-enlist, I really want to be able to become a paratrooper. To which the general kind of like doesn't even really continue the conversation. He's just like, huh. Well, that's neat. Anyways, we're at the airport now. I gotta go. Bye. And then Roy never sees this guy ever again. A couple months later, Roy's contract is about to be up. He has to decide if he's gonna re-enlist or if he's gonna get out. And his potential re-enlistment contract, there's an airborne.
That is the rubbing salt at the wounds at whole another level. Have you ever thought about being paratrooper? It's just like finally something's gonna happen, right? When he's like losing hope of that shit, and then that guy just fucks off. There you go.
Packet. Courtesy of General Westmoreland, if he decides to re-enlist, he will get to go to airborne school and he will get to become a paratrooper. So that's what he does. He goes to airborne school, gets his jump wings, becomes a full-fledged paratrooper, and then he gets stationed with the legendary 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Liberty, sorry. Okay, sidebar. Look, I don't care if we're going to be renaming stuff every once in a while. That's completely fine. However, name it after a war hero or something. Don't just pick a generic term like Liberty, okay? I don't need Fort Liberty. I don't need Fort Life. I don't need Fort Pursuit of Happiness, okay? Quit doing generic shit and name it after an actual badass war hero. Anyways, Roy's at Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, North Carolina. He is with the 82nd Airborne. During this time, he's training, he's working, he's doing his thing. He also ends up meeting his wife, and he goes about this the old school way. He has to have chaperone meetings with her until he earns enough street cred to finally be able to sit on the front porch of her parents' house with her. Her name is Lala. They get married, she ends up getting pregnant, things are going exactly how they're supposed to go. And then in 1965, Roy gets deployed to Vietnam at the age of 30. Roy gets sent over there as an advisor. He's going to be training the South Vietnamese in how to fight back against the North Vietnamese and hopefully prevent the spread of communism. That's the plan. So he starts training these guys, he's working with them, and it gets to the point that he has to end up going out on some of these missions with them because they need a leader. They need somebody with more experience to go out and show them how it's done. And he does that multiple times. And then one day he's walking through the jungle and all of a sudden, Roy has no idea what's going on. One second, he's in South Vietnam on a mission. The next second, he's in a hospital in the Philippines, and everything goes by in a blur. And before he knows it, he's in San Antonio at the Fort Sam Houston Medical Center. At this point, Roy still has no idea what's going on. Doctors and nurses are coming and going. There's some pregnant woman named Lala that's trying to hang out with him all day long, and he's just not comprehending anything that's happening to him. Roy's wife, Lala, would be informed that Roy had stepped on a landmine in South Vietnam during one of their patrols, and they don't know how he survived, but the going theory was that it was some type of defect with the landmine, that when it exploded, the entire landmine didn't fragment, but the top of it stayed intact as one solid metal plate, and when he stepped on it, it detonated it, and the landmine plate shot up and smacked him on the ass so hard that it broke his back and jolted his brain so severely that they don't think he'll ever regain his memory. In addition to that, due to his broken back, he would almost certainly never be able to walk again, even if he did come to mentally. And this goes on for weeks of Lala showing him pictures, telling him stories, trying to remind him of who he...
Oh, that's so fucked up. I mean, obviously he didn't die, so that's good, but still it's so fucked up. I mean, Vietnam, right? The jungle warfare has always been like intense. I'm pretty sure Federation made video about, what was the video? I forgot about that. But yeah, the whole jungle warfare is like insane, right? I've seen other videos from other channels too, like, who was it? Like, I don't know. But yeah, basically the whole thing like about the mines and like, what was that video? Was it from Federation? I forgot, man. Like, I'm pretty sure it was from Federation. Yeah, it was for Federation. Like, there were like group of people, right, who like they were like cave type system, right, when they went inside and like fought and all that. So the whole Vietnam War and like the mines and like jungle warfare is insane when you think about it, right? It would like cause PTSD at a whole other level. But yeah, obviously he's lucky that he didn't die. But that thing, like, hitting head, basically concussion at a level that you don't have memory anymore. Obviously your spine is fucked now, you can't walk, and now your wife is pregnant, and then all this shit happens.
He was. And then one day he just wakes up, he snaps out of it. He's sitting in a rehab room at the hospital by himself at a table, and in front of him there's like the child's toy, the big rectangle with like the cylinders and the squares and the triangles, and you shove each one through the corresponding shape. He's sitting there with that in front of him, and the PT person is like, "Can you put the shapes through there, Roy?" And he's like, "Yeah, obviously I could put the shapes through there." And they're like, "Well, why don't you go ahead and do it?" He's like, "What, am I applying to get into the Marine Corps? Like, what is happening right now? Why do you think I can't do that?"
He basically snapped out of it. "Can you put the shapes in there?" Like, what the fuck you just said? Of course I'm gonna shape. What you talking about?
And they're like, "Well, just go ahead and do it." So he does it. He's like, "Okay, obviously, what is happening right now?" They then explain to him that he has been unable to do that for weeks. Every single time they've got him to try, and Roy is just like literally snapped out of it like that. He's 100% mentally all there. He just doesn't remember the accident itself. He remembers everything else. So Roy's back. This is great. Now he just wants to get back up on his feet. He wants to keep serving in the army.
That is insane thing that our brain does, right? Wherever some kind of people who basically have a bike crash and things like that, motorcycle crash, sometimes are like detached limb or something because of the crash. Then they go to hospital, the limbs get repaired and everything. After all the operation, they come out and they just know like they were driving, riding the bike, and now they're in the hospital with like some kind of a plaster or something. They don't remember anything between that, right? And obviously all of that can't be blur, right? It can't happen that fast. So only reason is that their mind literally blocks that memory because it's too intense for them to remember. If they remember, they'll have mental scar. So our brain has like this kind of a defense mechanism. If something's too strong, our brain basically blocks it. You usually go into shock, and that shock, your brain basically sees something as something to block. That's how whole brain system works, which is insane.
He wants to keep jumping out of planes. He wants to go back to Vietnam and be with his guys. And that's just how Roy is. So he demands that they start giving him physical therapy as soon as possible. And that's what he does. And over the course of a couple weeks, he comes to the painful realization that these physical therapists aren't getting him ready to walk and run and be in the army again. They're getting him mentally ready to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. The doctors are telling him he's never going to walk again. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, and he needs to accept that. But Roy's not buying it. If they're not going to push him to get the results that he wants, he's going to push himself. The night nurses come in, they catch him, they give him a pill, they knock him out, they put him to sleep. He wakes up the next morning, his hip hurts from where he fell out of bed, and his leg muscles are sore from bearing weight for the first time in months. But the plus side, his hip hurts and his legs are sore, so obviously they're gonna work if he just keeps building them up stronger.
There's
and
a feeling
stronger.
there.
So that's what he does every night. He rolls out of bed, he drags himself across the floor, lifts himself up, and puts as much weight on his legs as he possibly can. Sometimes the nurses catch him and
Yeah, see, the problem with the medical communities, it's not, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but they usually just like base this thing on like similar cases they've had, even though everybody's different, right? And you can't have that kind of accuracy. So they're like, he's probably never going to walk again based on the damage he has. And then they basically just like focus on that rather than like, let's try to push him a bit, see if it works or not, then we'll decide type of way. Obviously nowadays, like brain scan, CT scan and things like that, is becoming like better, so you can accurately know it if it's going to work or not. So that type of thing doesn't happen that much nowadays. But back then, right? But doctors basically say, oh, this is never going to happen, right? And then turns out that wasn't the case. And you need some form of determination and just like mental fortitude as well. Otherwise, obviously, it's not going to work.
And try to put him back to sleep. The nurses are getting pissed off at him because he keeps doing this, but his legs keep getting stronger and stronger, and he's able to make it over to the nightstand faster and faster. And it gets to the point where all the other guys in this medical bay realize what he's doing, and they start cheering him on at night. Nobody's ratting him out. They're trying to distract the nurses to get Roy the time that he needs to be able to do his version of physical therapy. And this goes on for months. During the day, they're getting him ready for his life in a wheelchair. He's begging them just more time for more PT, and he'll be able to walk again. They're not buying it. They're doing the paperwork in the background to get him med boarded out of the U.S. Army. They know that he's done. But Roy never gives up on himself, and he keeps training every single night. Then, after having been in the hospital for 5 months, the doctor walks in with Roy's discharge papers. Roy begs and he pleads not to discharge him out of the army, and the doctor finally says, Roy, even if we continue doing PT, at best, maybe you'll be able to stand up one day. You're never going to be able to walk again. At that point, Roy hops up out of the bed, stands directly in front of the doctor, and takes one step towards him. And it was one of the most excruciating pains that he's ever felt in his entire life. He's got tears in his eyes, but he's looking this doctor right in his face. And the doctor, shocked that Roy hopped out of bed and took a step towards him, says, Benevidez, if you can walk out of this room, I'll tear these papers up. So Roy walked out of that room.
Oh, bang! Hold on now, hold on. Oh, that hurt. Walk it off. Hey, man, you can walk.
Shortly after that, he walked out of that.
Oh my God. He took one step and it was like painful enough that he was in tears. This doctor tells him like, walk out of this room. Of course he's going to do it because everything hangs on that. But after that, the level of pain, most people would go into shock just by that pain, right? They say like, shoot me with morphine or some shit, right? In today, basically, if something like that happens. But yeah, imagine the level of determination, right? It's basically his whole life. His whole life has been like that, since his parents died. He's been an angry guy because there was always something missing in his life, right? Missing the love of the parents and things like that. And all that anger basically he mustered up in that moment just to get out of the room.
That hospital and went back to Fort Bragg. Obviously, he gets assigned a desk job, but despite that, Roy's going to do the best job he can no matter what tasks they give him. So he crushes that job the best he can, and when he goes home at night, he continues to train. First, he starts walking a couple miles a day. Then he's walking 5 miles a day. Then he's running 5 miles a day. Then he's running 10 miles a day and doing 500 push-ups in a single day, every day. And he works himself up to being just as fast, just as strong as he ever was. And then, since he did such a good job at that desk job, he kind of figured out how things worked. And then wouldn't you know it, one day, out of the blue, Roy Benevidez's name ended up on a manifest to do one of the jumps for the 82nd Airborne's training. Not just one manifest, but 3. Roy did 3 jumps in a single day after having broken his back.
What are the odds of that?
What are the odds of that?
And after having done that, Roy sits back, relaxes, reflects on his achievement. No, I'm just kidding. He goes out and decides that he wants to become a Green Beret now. So he goes off to Special Forces selection and he makes it. He passes. He becomes a Green Beret. On one hand, absolutely incredible. It is almost unbelievable that he's able to accomplish this. On the other hand, it's obvious that he was going to be able to accomplish this, right? Because if you don't know about these Special Forces groups, it's never like the fastest, the strongest, the freak athlete that ends up making these Special Forces units. It's always just that tough farm kid that you're going to have to kill to get him to stop. It's that person that's never going to quit. And if there was ever a embodiment of that archetype of person, it's Roy Benevidez, okay? Homie stepped on a landmine and literally walked it off. Of course he had what it took to become a Green Beret. That's just to get selected to be in the unit though, so then he has to go off and get all of his other training. He becomes a linguist, he gets cross-trained as a medic, he gets trained on every heavy weapon system, he becomes trained in military intelligence, the gathering of information. So he gets done with all this training, then he gets orders that he is going to be deploying to Central America. Here's the problem, Roy doesn't want to deploy to Central America, Roy wants to go back to Vietnam. So Roy goes back to that very same office that he worked in for a little while he was training before he became a Green Beret.
I mean, imagine that mentality. It's something that really fucked you up. Vietnam and that mine. Rather than like staying away from that place because it's a scar in your memory, you're like, fuck that, I'm going back there. That level of mentality is strong.
And wouldn't you know it, somehow or another his orders got changed and he was sent to Vietnam instead.
For me.
But Roy wasn't just going to be going to Vietnam, he was going to be going to other countries neighboring Vietnam, like Cambodia. Roy was part of MACV-SOG. Okay, real quick, for those that don't know, MACV-SOG at this point in time is America's premier top secret special forces group, okay? They take all the best guys from all the other special forces, the Army Rangers, the Marine Raiders, the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs. They take their best guys and they put them in this unit together as like America's special forces dream team. Basically, they're the ones doing all the stuff that America's not doing. You know, this group is so secretive that nobody even knew that these
Literally
guys
Black Ops.
existed until like 30 years after Vietnam. Okay, SOG, everybody thinks it stands for Special Operations Group. That's not what it stands for. It stands for Studies and Observations Group. And they did that on purpose because they wanted it to sound like some nerd shit. That way, if a politician or a high-ranking officer that wasn't supposed to be in the know
Sounds
read
like
that
spy shit.
document, they weren't going to ask any questions. During Vietnam, these guys had a 150-to-1 kill-death ratio. For every MACV-SOG member that went down, 150 enemies went down first. And they do all kinds of different crazy stuff during Vietnam, but when Roy gets linked up with them, they're working in Cambodia. Okay, real brief, oversimplified version of what's going on here. You have the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, and they are trying to supply the Viet Cong, the guerrilla fighters in South Vietnam, with a bunch of supplies. Now, they have 2 options.
Allah basically he did all this shit. He did the multiple jumps in a day, right? He became Green Beret and he just like, what is the next level shit I can do? Just like, I'm gonna go with the SOG, the best of the best. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to stop this upward trend that I'm on. I'm going to reach the peak as much as I can. Doesn't matter how much danger it is, right? This is insane shit, right? It's just more than just a Rambo at this point, right? It's not one thing. It's just his whole life. I'm guessing the Rambo level shit is going to come now. But yeah, you know what? I'm going to stop here. It's already like 30-minute mark. And I'm going to do this video next time, tomorrow or something, right? I'm guessing the action is coming now, the Rambo level. But yeah. Well, this was real Rambo, Roy Benevidez, the Green Beret that took on an army with just a knife. He's gonna take on an army now after he injured his back, couldn't even walk, and like after that injury, he's gonna do all this shit now, which is insane. He's not even 100% anymore. All right, I'll see you next time.